So I say that 1 Corinthians 10:14 over here on the right-hand side strikes us initially as at least something of an anticlimactic letdown, at least something of a red flag. Now, we don't want to prejudge too much because Scripture has ups and downs, and sometimes things go bad and get better, or go good and get worse. So we don't want to judge too rashly, but the anticipation that hopefully great blessings are going to flow to all the families of the earth following the Queen of Sheba's visit seems to be at least momentarily disrupted here. But as we continue reading from 1 Kings 10:14 onward, the maybe yikes turns into a definitely yikes, especially if we're familiar with Torah and we compare 1 Corinthians 10 and 11 with Deuteronomy 17 that I mentioned briefly before, which gives specific laws concerning Israel's kings before they ever had a king. Moses prophetically knew that they would one day have a king, and says when that happens, don't choose a king from the other nations, choose one from among your brothers. And then he has in Deuteronomy 17:16 through 18 a few specific rules that the king must follow. He must not acquire many horses for himself. He must not cause the people to return to Egypt to acquire horses, because the Lord said, don't return that way again, the land of their slavery. He shall not acquire many wives for himself, lest his heart turn away, nor shall he acquire for himself silver and gold. As we track Deuteronomy 17 with 1 Kings 10 and 11, it's almost as if Solomon took Deuteronomy 17 as a checklist for all the things to do, rather than all the things not to do, because he checks off every item perfectly. Let's go through it. Verse 16, he must not acquire many horses for himself. 1 Kings 10:26, Solomon gathered together horses and horsemen. He had 1,400 chariots and 12,000 horsemen. Sounds like a lot to me. He must not return to Egypt to acquire many horses. Down here, verse 28, Solomon's import of horses was from Egypt. A chariot could be imported from Egypt. He's going back to Egypt, the land of slavery, to acquire horses specifically. He should not acquire many wives for himself. Scroll down to chapter 11. Solomon had 700 wives and 300 concubines. Now, even if you allow for polygamy or polygyny, specifically one man having multiple wives in the Old Testament, 700 wives and 300 concubines is unquestionably excessive. That's a lot of wives. Okay, Solomon had a child through Hagar, which was a lack of faith. That was problematic in itself. David had multiple wives, but 700, I think there's no question here. 700 wives, 300 concubines is excessive. It's going to be once every 3.5 years. If you visit one wife per day, you'll see one of them in every 3.5 years amongst your wives and your concubines. Certainly, he acquired many wives for himself. Now, the commandment in Deuteronomy 17 was not to do that, lest his heart turn away, back to 1 Kings 11. And his wives turned away his heart, sure enough, because he didn't listen to the Torah. Nor shall he acquire excessive silver for himself. Okay, back in 1 Kings 10, Solomon the king made silver as common in Jerusalem as a stone. Any random let's pick up a piece of silver from the ground like you'd pick up a rock and skip it across the stream. Nor shall he acquire for himself excessive gold, and that's where we started in right after the Queen of Sheba story. Solomon's 666 talents of gold, and then the story just goes on about all the stuff, the shields and the swords and all of the stuff that Solomon made with his gold. It just goes on and on about Solomon's gold. His drinking vessels were of gold. The vessels of the house of the forest were of pure gold. Nothing was silver, because silver was as common as rocks. Gold, gold, gold. Just talking about, it's like the text doesn't stop talking about Solomon's gold. But it all begins with the 666 talents of gold that he accumulated, as recorded right after the Queen of Sheba story. Now, if you perchance didn't know Torah and you didn't know Deuteronomy 17, if there was any doubt lingering left in our minds, which there shouldn't be, we keep reading in 1 Kings 11, and these wives who turned his heart away, sure enough, Solomon did what was evil. Okay, if you need an explicit statement in case anybody's saying, well, but Solomon still has, God gave him all this wisdom and he wrote 3 books of the Bible and made the temple, how can Solomon be that bad of a guy? Here's an explicit statement for you. Solomon did what was evil in the sight of the Lord and did not follow the Lord as his David father had done. He built a high place for Chemosh, the god of Moab, Molech of the Ammonites. He did this for all of his foreign wives who made offerings and sacrifices to their God. So unquestionably, from 1 Kings 10:14, Solomon's 666 talents of gold onward, he just falls off a cliff. He goes through the Deuteronomy checklist and everything that a king is forbidden from doing. Check, check, check. He's going to do every one of those and follow the build idols and shrines for the false gods of his foreign wives. And the Lord explicitly says that Solomon did evil. So there's definitely a turning from the great things that Solomon did, turning point at 1 Kings 10:14, where he falls off a cliff.